Hey all, Jasper here. I just wanted to make a quick rant about the systems in Final Fantasy XIV that I really dislike. I love Final Fantasy XIV as a game overall. It has clearly a bunch of passionate developers behind it that really love what they do. But there are so many things that the community just doesn't call out that I just need to get off my chest because I'm tired of explaining to people why I don't like Final Fantasy XIV for a lot of reasons. And I made a rant about this earlier, but it was like an hour and a half long, so I've condensed my points to a really, abridged version of that because nobody wants to hear me talk for any extended amount of time. So pretty much, Final Fantasy XIV eliminates all player choice from you. You're pretty much picking a fighting game character from a roster when you're picking a class. At max level, your character is going to be the exact same as every other character in the game that is that class, except for your materia, which is just minor stat boosts, and there are wrong answers. So if you want to be creative, you're going to get yelled at if you try to do higher level content with bad materia. So there's almost no player choice whatsoever, and the few choices you do have, there are tons of wrong answers and really only 1 to 2 right answers in the most of the time. All the tanks are super boring, and they do 1 or 2 combos, and they can do an AoE combo. And you have mitigation buttons, but you don't need them until you get into Savage content. So you can pretty much get through that by remembering to put your tank stance on and hitting like 5 buttons. You can get all the way to Savage content. Once you get into Savage content, obviously you need to actually know your class a little better, but it's just, tanks should require a little bit more than hitting 5 buttons. And that's if you want to get really creative. Most of the time you can get through dungeons by hitting 3. Then we get into healers, which have been sectioned off into healing or shielding. My main problems with this is that not only are they making it so that your character at level 80 is the same as every other character of your class, they're making all the classes play super similarly. So like, if you're a melee DPS, you can raise your party's DPS by using the monk damage boost, I forgot what it's called, or you could raise your party's DPS by using the Dragoon's critical buff and his other buff that buffs one of your allies. Or you can raise the party's DPS by using the ninja sneak attack by increasing the damage by 5% to the boss. I guess Samurai doesn't have a party buff. Samurai and Black Mage are similar in the sense that Samurai is just a melee Black Mage. You just do a bunch of things leading up to one big spell, or in Samurai's case, a really complicated Japanese word that makes you just hit them twice with your sword. It really takes a lot of agency and player choice out of the game. And not only that, but you have to do like 200 plus hours of story or buy story skips, which kind of nullifies the point that people make that they have it so you have to do the story to get to the latest content so that you can actually like enjoy the things that they put into the game. They're just going to let you skip it next expansion, dude, for $25, unless they raise the price. If you want to get into the game and play a late game dungeon with your friend, and you're just getting into the game, let's say they recommended you to it, you either have to be an absolute Giga Chad no-lifer and just spend like 400 hours in the game doing everything. This is assuming you watch cutscenes. It's probably like 200 hours if you skip all the cutscenes. Getting past every single expansion and leveling up your single character's job to 80 so that you can actually do the content with them. And by then you're probably done your job so much you're tired of it because it's the exact same as every other job. Because it's the exact same job as everyone else has. There's no way to customize it. There's no way to make it so that you play differently. So as soon as you establish that level 80 playstyle, you're going to be doing that forever. The other options are to buy a story skip, which then you need to buy a level skip for, or grind incessantly for several hours. And by several hours, assuming that you got the story skip, you don't have any of the story quests to level up on. So it's going to be a while. You're probably just going to be grinding dungeons if you're a healer or tank, or good luck if you're a DPS, I guess. At that point, you kind of need to just buy a level boost for it, which is another $25. So if your friend invites you to this game, you can either spend $50, $25, and a shit ton of leveling, or a shit ton of leveling with a shit ton of story, and absolutely no life the game for several weeks. And this all applies that if you have an alt, by the way. If you have an alt, they don't really give you much credit outside from a few account-wide mounts and a few account-wide items, a couple of which boost experience, but you can only equip one on your character, so good luck. The story of Final Fantasy XIV is pretty good, But if, let's say you have a friend that's waiting for you at endgame, you don't really care. You just want to get past it all and get to the endgame. Like, but it actually works against the story, the fact that you have to complete it to get to the actual content that matters at the end of the game. Because as somebody who got into this game because a friend got me into it and I wanted to do the content with the friend, I could care less about the story of Final Fantasy XIV at this point. I've actually read up on it. It's actually rather good. They've clearly put a lot of time into it. Whoever the writer is isn't a hack. He actually knows what he's doing. This isn't another World of Warcraft thing where they just absolutely demolish the story every expansion. It's actually a really good ongoing story. But I don't care. I've skipped it all because I wanted to get to content with my friend. So I'm at a point now where I just don't care about the story because I've already skipped so much of it because I was forced to do it because I wanted to get to content with my friend that I know the brief summary of every expansion and that's about it. So they've wasted several hours of my life on stuff that I didn't need to do because you can clearly skip story segments because you can buy story skips in the store. You can't just skip the most recent story. And then there's the absolute trash fire of you get to 80, and when you get to 80, you realize the class, this is a little bit of an exaggeration because you generally figure out your class's playstyle about 10 levels before you hit max level. That's when it really all starts to come together. But like things like Samurai don't have a lot of their big bongo slash attacks until they hit closer to 80. But let's say you get to 80 and you're like, I actually don't like this class. I don't like this class. There's no way for me to edit it. There's no way for me to edit the playstyle at all. I'm the same as every other person of my class. And now I'm stuck as it because it's the only level 80 class I have. I'm going to have to start again. At that point, you have to level up an entire new class because the jobs have absolutely no flexibility to them. You picked your character. They chose what your character does. They chose your character's skills. They chose how your character should play. And good luck with the rest of it. I'd also like to mention that if they change your character class at all, you're pretty much absolutely screwed. I played an Astrologian going into Shadowbringers, and any Astrologian can tell you that we were absolutely the most gimped thing in the world, to the point where level 70 white mages were healing more than level 80 Astrologians. Not only that, but we did almost no damage, we had no utility skills, and the one, except for cards, and the one utility skill we had was so dumbed down it wasn't even the same thing anymore. And it took so long to actually trigger the big bonus off of it that, again, you're just better being white mage. So I had no choice over that, and I had to level up a whole new class for Shadowbringers. It was actually so bad that people wouldn't let you be an astrologer in higher level dungeons. Not even raids dungeons. You would... And you were like the least played class as a healer, so people would automatically blame you if anyone ever wiped on new content because you had such bad heals. And I was just stuck with it. Now I'm sure there's some people that have only played like WoW and Final Fantasy that are like, oh, isn't that how all MMOs are? No, that's not how all MMOs are. Most MMOs have some kind of character growth system where you can customize your character's playstyle to your own bit like preferences. Guild Wars 2, I went on a fucking deranged rant in the original version of this. But let's just say that, like, if you play a thief in Guild Wars 2, and I see you in the world, you can have one of, like, 40 playstyles, and they're all valid, and they all work. Not only that, Thief has its own unique profession mechanic. Thief is super unique in a ton of ways. Every class is super unique in a ton of ways. They all have their own unique profession mechanics. And if you ever want to try another class, you're like, okay, these 40 play styles of Thief, none of them are for me. I want to be a mage, and so you pick an Elementalist. If you got your Thief to 80, you get these things called tomes, and once you get 79 tomes, you pretty much have a level 80 ult, because each one gives you a level, and they're account bound. And you might be like, oh, okay, so you can have a level 80 ult right off the bat in Guild Wars 2 if you play enough. That's pretty cool. But don't you have to do all this stuff to unlock stuff? No. Guild Wars 2 has a million things in place where you can get to whatever content you want in like under 5 minutes. Granted, you might not be great at that content. And that's a bit of an exaggeration because there is some stuff that you have to go through the story for. But pretty much what I'm like, that's just to getting into zones. And you can, if you have a friend that's in that zone, let's say I had a friend that's like, hey, do this zone with me, do like this world quest with me. I'm like, okay, teleport to friend. I'm at my friend in the zone. I didn't have to do the story. I can do all the quests there. There's just so many player-unfriendly mechanics because they want you to experience the story, but then you can pay to skip the story. Anyway, I think I've said everything I wanted to say. Final Fantasy XIV frustrates me because it has the potential to be one of the greatest MMOs in existence, in my opinion. I think the overall opinion is that it already is one of the greatest MMOs in existence, and I can see why. Again, there's a ton of amazing things about the game, but the class system is just an absolute garbage fire to everyone that actually wants any kind of their choices to matter. I mean, I guess it's great if you don't want your choices to matter, if you just wanted to be like, hey, I want to just sit down and do a dungeon crawl. I don't want to customize my character. I don't want this to be an RPG. I want this to just be, I pick a class and I go at it. And the fact that it takes out all those RPG elements and just, it's like, hey, the design team said, you're playing this class this way. If you want something else, pick a different class. That's what doesn't sit right with me. And the fact that it seems almost arrogant that they want you to, they force you to go through hundreds of hours of story or give them additional money and then go through 40 plus hours of story, assuming you skip every single cutscene to actually get to the most recent content so you can do stuff with your friends. Oh no, it doesn't sit right with me. Anyway, that's all I had for this video. Thanks for listening. Talk to you later.